Holy Jordan. Panasonic's animal autofocus deep learning works on dinosaurs.
What are you saying, Chris?
What am I saying? I'm simply saying that life finds a way. Welcome back, DPReview TV viewers. Chris Nichols here, and today we're looking at the Panasonic S1. And we've come to a very interesting place to do it. One of the great things about Calgary is you can drive 2 hours and find yourselves in the mountains, 2 hours and find yourselves in lake country, or 2 hours and find yourselves in the Badlands. And out here in the Badlands, we are starting our adventure from the town of Wayne. Now, in the first half of the 1900s, Wayne was a prosperous little coal mining town, but as you can see, it is now currently 31 people away from being a ghost town. As you can see, it's a pretty harsh day here. The light's not doing us any favors, so Jordan is shooting as well this whole video today on an S1. He's shooting in HLG mode to take care of that contrast, and it is 10-bit. Let's get into the ghost town, and let's have ourselves a little journey. I need you to help me out. It's nothing I've never asked you to before. I just want you to curl up in the fetal position here, right in front of the bridge in the middle of the road, and I need you to cry. All right, guys, so now behind me you can see the hoodoos, just an iconic part of the Alberta Badlands. So ironically, Panasonic helped pioneer the Micro Four Thirds system, which was really an attempt to make professional class cameras that are much more compact, smaller design and everything. And now they have a camera which is straight up the same as a professional DSLR. Like I said before with the S1R, this is a heavy camera. It's got very comparable weight to a D850 or a 5D Mark IV. Because of that, it also has a very SLR kind of feel, and the buttons and handling here are excellent. By far, some of the nicest controls I've ever used. Great dial feel now. I actually don't mind the on-off switch. Some people might find that difficult, but I really like the placement of the autofocusing setup with my thumb. And of course, this body has a rugged design and a fully weather-sealed chassis. So again, just a nice example of where I'm vertically challenged and I can't quite get the angle I want, but I can lift the camera up here, tilt that screen out. Again, it's a Fuji-esque style screen tilt. You've got waist level finder. You do have that higher frame. I can shoot from below, and of course push the button and I can flip this out in one direction. All right, so we've just found Alberta's springtime bloom of the crocus flower. It's a beautiful flower. Wind's blowing a little bit, but I found some of these crocus where they're not getting hit by the wind too much. And I'm just testing the IBIS on this camera, and even from the S1R that I played with before, it's incredibly impressive. I mean, I'm happy with that for sure, handheld, and that's at 15. So really nice stability, an excellent shutter mechanism too, incredibly well dampened, makes this a very capable platform to shoot from. So I love pretty much everything about this touchscreen interface on the S1, except this is one of the few cameras where my nose tip actually does constantly set the autofocusing point to the bottom left corner. Good thing I can adjust my magnification on the EVF and give myself some eye relief. There we go. Now I just have to hover above the camera like a weirdo. Jordan's going to pull away slowly from me here in a moment because he's testing the continuous autofocus on his Panasonic S1. We'll see how it tracks me as we start to walk. And while I go down this lonely highway, I want to start talking about the Panasonic S1's image quality. How is Panasonic going to do with their first foray into full-frame cameras? And honestly, they do amazingly well. The Panasonic S1 is very comparable to anything you're going to find out of the Nikon Z6 or the Sony a7 III or any of the other 24-megapixel full-frame sensors out there. I think they've got nice punchy JPEGs with a lot of customization in the color profiles. And low-light performance is absolutely comparable to the major competitors, so I'm not going to say they're head and shoulders above anybody, but they're very competitive. And their multi-shot is one of the more effective systems on the market. I mean, with the Panasonic S1, 24 megapixels is perfect for most people's applications. If you felt that you needed incredibly high resolution, and if you do, you know who you are out there, you could get the 47 megapixel S1R and you could quadruple that to almost 200 megapixels in multi-shot mode. But I think that this S1 punches really high above its weight. I think it's very comparable. I think you'd be very pleased with the image quality you're getting out of it. I don't know, Jordan, where's the Michael Kenna shot? Hey, where's the stark beauty in this crap light? See, didn't I tell you that this camera is big? Look at it compared to that church. Although, on the same token, look at me compared to this church. I'm huge. Or this is a very small church. And this is the Drumheller little church. You know, a lot of people, when they pick up a Panasonic and use the contrast detect only autofocus, they find the whole DFD experience quite disconcerting. And I agree, your focus is always going in and out constantly. I like to back button focus in continuous AF, so I'm always watching my frame jitter and shake. And it's not the nicest shooting experience, absolutely. Now, with Panasonic, a lot of the times they still are in focus. One thing that doesn't help though, we're finding that the EVF on this, although amazingly high magnification and very high resolution, actually gets a little bit softer, loses a bit of resolution when you are actually continuously autofocusing. So that might also throw you off just a little bit. Okay, but let's get right down to what this camera does well and what it doesn't do well. First off, the face and eye detect system. I do find that if your subjects are closer and they're not moving very fast, it's a brilliant system. Great for seated portraits or interviews or people at a walking pace. But the minute that they start to run or move around in the frame rapidly, it really has a hard time keeping up. So unfortunately, sports and action, I wouldn't necessarily rely on it. What I did find worked better for that was just tracking autofocus. Touch on my subject, lock them in place, and it did a fair job. I still wasn't getting that high a hit rate. In the end, I think that means that if I was shooting sports action and wildlife, I would not have supreme confidence in this camera. Continuous frames per second rate on this camera is okay, but not great. Again, 6 frames per second, although keep in mind that's just with autofocus. You can push higher if you don't need autofocus tracking. Don't forget though, it's not all doom and gloom. The Panasonic S1 does have the 6K photo mode, which we love. 30 frames per second, pre-buffered modes at 18 megapixels. That is pretty awesome. And also keep in mind the Panasonic S1 has an amazing buffer. You can basically shoot the entire card in JPEG until it runs out. It's unlimited. And in RAW, 90 shots in a row, so that's never going to run out. Yeah, I suppose I should give some context for those that don't know what's going on there. That is the world's largest dinosaur. And Drumheller as a town is actually quite dinosaur famous. You know, there's lots of fossils around here. We have the world famous Royal Tyrrell Museum here. And so dinosaurs are kind of the prevailing theme. And so now I'm going to try to tie those in somehow to this camera. SLRs are dinosaurs. That's a dinosaur. That dinosaur is the world's largest. This is getting up there, pretty big. I'm stretching, man, I'm stretching. Tell you what, why don't we put it over to Jordan, let him do his video talk.
Jordan here to talk about video on the Panasonic S1. And Panasonic has long been known as one of the best manufacturers if you're looking for video quality in a stills camera. This is no exception. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. We're getting unlimited recording, even in 4K with this camera. So the S1 is capable of recording 4K up to 60 frames per second, but there's one major caveat there, which is if you're shooting at 60, you're gonna have a significant Super 35 crop using that, which kind of defeats the purpose of a full frame video camera if that's gonna be your main shooting mode. For slow-mo though, it works quite well. And also in terms of slow-mo, this camera is capable of recording up to 180 frames per second in pretty respectable quality. Weirdly though, if you're someone like us that shoots at 24 frames per second, the camera will only record that at 30 or 25 frames per second. It's something you can easily fix in post because there's no audio, but it is a little bit of extra hassle. Now the S1 does already have a lot of my favorite profiles, including the 709 Like, which I like to shoot on whenever possible. However, there is no V-Log in this. Now that's going to come later as a paid firmware upgrade, and the camera's only going to shoot 8-bit at this point. However, if you dig through the menus, you can find there's an option to shoot in H.265 exclusively with the HLG profile. That's how I've been filming today. And as you can see right here, there's a huge advantage in dynamic range. So if you need a lot of dynamic range in the shot, that's the way to shoot it. And the added benefit is you're getting 10-bit. Now this full frame sensor here does give us some real advantages when we're comparing it to the GH5 and GH5S. If you're shooting high ISOs, you're getting a very clean image out of this camera. I would consider even 12,800 somewhat usable. Now it certainly gets soft. There's a lot of noise reduction going on, but it still does look quite natural. A little less natural is the rolling shutter on this camera. Now, it's not worse than its competition right now. I'd consider it very similar to what we're seeing out of the A7 III or the Nikon Z6, but it's certainly quite prevalent if you're used to shooting with the GH5, GH5S. However, the stabilizer really helps with that. If you're shooting handheld, it'll minimize those rolling shutter jitters, and it really is the best video stabilizer that I've seen in full frame right now, taking that crown away from the Nikon Z6. I love the way Panasonic handles audio. You've got a microphone jack, a headphone jack, and it's compatible with the brilliant XLR1 adapter, which gets you 2 XLR inputs. Really nice fine control over the audio as well. Now for continuous autofocus, Panasonic is still using the DFD system they've been using from their other mirrorless cameras. And I gotta be honest, for a lot of types of work, it can be a real letdown. You're gonna get this kind of pulsing behind your subject. For stills, you get a high hit rate, but for video, it's very noticeable and quite distracting. So I find most of the time I'm using either single shot autofocus, where it just quickly focuses on my subject and stays there, or I'm manually focusing. And Panasonic is really taking care of you in those regards. If you've got something like the 24-105 lens I'm using now, it's focus by wire. However, in the menus, you can choose linear focus, so you can do repetitive focus pulls. I've been doing those today, and you can even choose how many angular degrees you want on the lens. So I can have it spin 90 degrees to go from macro to infinity, or 180 degrees. It's very flexible and customizable. And also, 2 of the 3 Panasonic lenses that were announced alongside the S1 also have proper mechanical focus clutches. We're going to be looking at the image from the S1 in a lot more detail once the paid firmware upgrade comes out later this summer. That's going to be getting us 10-bit recording and vlog, and I hope we see some other updates with that, because we're missing waveforms. We've recently commented, hey, waveforms should be on every camera. This doesn't have it. GH5 and GH5S do include that, and I'd love to see a few more other video-centric features. So we'll be waiting with bated breath for that update. In the meantime, though, if you're grabbing this as a photo camera, you can rest very assured this is still going to be a killer video camera, but it's not going to replace the GH5 or GH5S in my bag.
I normally don't like the way that these tilt screens work just in one axis, but for this shot, great, perfect. The other thing I want to say here, I'm noticing it's getting to the end of the day. I'm at 11% battery life. It's starting to drop. So it's not terrible on this camera, but with such a big battery, I expected more battery life. Video, you get pretty good longevity, but for photos, you're going to want an extra battery. 400 CEPA shots rated. You probably go a little bit higher than that, but it's just fast enough that you are still checking it, and I am turning the camera off and on a lot just to make sure I don't waste whatever precious life I have left. Thankfully, USB-C charging for everything. You can power the camera, you can charge it off your car. So how does the Panasonic S1 compare against some of its closest competition, like the Nikon Z6 and the Sony A7 III? First off, let's look at the Nikon Z6. Very rugged body, a little bit beefier kind of feel, very much like this. I do still feel that the Panasonic is a more enjoyable camera to use in a lot of ways. Great menu system, I like a lot of the customizations, and I love the handling. The ergonomics on this camera are brilliant, but the Z6 isn't bad either. I don't love the tracking focus on either of them, and I'm not really enjoying how they're implemented either compared to something else like the Sony A7 III. So think of this as an Nikon Z6 with 2 card slots, 6K photo mode, and absolutely better video capabilities. No external recorders to get better quality out of this camera. Well, but then you get the Sony A7 III, which of course is quite a bit more affordable than this camera. I'll say this about the Sony. It's a much lighter, more compact body. Great when you want to be discreet and take it traveling and things like that. The menus are improved, but they're nothing to write home about. But the autofocus and shooting rate on the Sony are absolutely superior. And video capabilities are pretty good too. So if you want a camera that's light and compact, shoots faster, maybe a little bit better for action, sports, and wildlife, the Sony A7 III is a fantastic choice and a great all-around camera. I still find this to feel more like a serious camera. I just feel that the autofocus and the shooting rate are going to lag a little bit behind. So as we enjoy this beautiful light in gorgeous Alberta, I just want to kind of give my final thoughts on it. First off, the impression you get when you hold these cameras is that they are fantastically made. I mean, Panasonic has really done an amazing job building a professional handling, looking, and feeling camera. The EVF is stunning. The image quality is fantastic, and I love having the 6K photo modes and the multi-shot modes. I think it really comes down to that DFD autofocus. I think that's really what people are going to have a hard time with. Yeah, it gives us advantages like no banding in our photographs, but that's fairly rare. But when you want to do tracking, when you want to do continuous autofocus, I feel like we're now starting to see some of the weaknesses here in this camera. At first, when I looked at the S1 and S1R, I really thought the S1 would be a better choice. It's more affordable, it's versatile, and if you're a videographer, it absolutely is. But the more I play with it and realize that the autofocus isn't quite there, the more it makes me want to have the S1R and just really take advantage of that high megapixel for shots just like this, where autofocus is really not playing a part. What kind of lenses are we going to have? This is a relatively new mount system. I mean, Leica's been doing it for a while, but we don't have a lot of glass. And if we're talking about high price tags, that's going to push it way up there. I think Panasonic is going to support this system pretty well, but it'll take a bit of time before a lot more lenses become available. Sigma also has a lot of their excellent prime lenses coming out for this. They do also make an interesting adapter, the MC21, that opens up a whole world of Canon EF glass. Unfortunately though, no continuous autofocus, but as you've probably learned from this video today, that might not be something you're worried about on this camera anyways. Let us know any comments that you have below. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel. Let us know on our Twitter and Instagram feeds what you think, and hit those DPReview forums. Let us know if this is the kind of camera that is going to suit your photography, or if there's maybe another choice out there. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining us today. See you soon.